So here we are for another edition of ORF Studios on the margins of the Raisina dialogue, and we have with us Dr. Gong Xue. We will be talking about her research interest, which is primarily on Chinese economic diplomacy and how China is managing a war, how China is managing its economic frontiers, if you will. So Dr. Xue, tell us something about the broader themes that you see emerging as we look at China and very aggressive economic diplomacy that it is following. After all, the kind of power that China is becoming is primarily determined by its economic base. So what are some of the 2 or 3 things you would say about China's economic diplomacy?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me here. Well, in terms of China's economic diplomacy, the predominant feature, of course, is its emphasis on the infrastructure development, either in the country itself or in its neighboring countries. And what we can see, for example, in Southeast Asia, China, you see, it has forged lots of mechanisms with Southeast Asian countries and also with ASEAN as a group. But other than that, China actually shifted sort of focus from the physical, investment into like the soft part, which I mean is governance. It's predominantly shown in the last May. As you know, the BRI International Cooperation Forum, President Xi Jinping introduced the principles of greenery, investment overseas. So it is like it is sort of like progress. Well, other than that, of course, it shows China's ambitions in governance, right? And the economic security nexus, like how we can use economics to realize part of its geostrategic purposes.
So when you look at the kind of expansive global economic ambitions that it is demonstrating through war and other, as you point out, myriad infrastructure projects around the world today, do you see any challenges emerging in the short to medium term, both in terms of material abilities of China to deliver on some of these commitments, as well as the larger normative issues that some countries, including India, have raised about what perhaps this represents if you compare to the past, what the Chinese aggressive economic ideas, how do they challenge the normative order on which the economic foundations of the post-Second World War liberal order was based? Any thoughts on that?
Thank you for the question. I think there are mainly 3 points. First of all is China's own ability of delivering the promises. Although Xi Jinping consolidated his power, which I doubt he could actually make everything done. For example, the local government, they did a lot of activities under the name of BRI, but the effectiveness may not really reflect what Xi Jinping wanted. And second of all, of course, is the responses of the region. Like ASEAN countries, they're trying to bring other like external powers into this region to counter like the possible challenge that China may bring into this region, and of course the risks that along the Belt and Road initiatives, such as terrorism, such as economic viability, like the sustainability, things like that. So they're emerging, and China realizes that. But in my mind, in the short term, it requires a lot of like powers for China to really solve those problems.
So one particular aspect of BRI, which which a lot of the discussion is taking place around this issue in India, is the China-Pakistan economic corridor, because it is also somehow the issues that it is raising are reflective of other issues which we have witnessed in South Asia. The Hambantota project in Sri Lanka, and this transfer of Chinese loans into debt. And the country is finding it very difficult to get out of this. It has been termed as Chinese debt diplomacy. How do you visualize? If you accept the fact that in the process some learning would take place in China as well, they would realize that they are facing these challenges. How do you think that can be managed in the short to medium term?
Well, To answer that question, I said an example of Misong Dam in Myanmar, which was suspended in 2011. So the Chinese company, the China Power Investment Corporation company, was still stuck in this suspended project. So not only just Myanmar has this, that trap diplomacy, but also the Chinese companies, they're suffering themselves. So far I didn't see China has like a really sound risk assessment in terms of political, transition, risks. But I think they are trying to learn. They are trying to bring the third parties, such as international consultancy firms, to help them understand the situation on the ground.
And tell us something about Singapore. Singapore, I think, has had a very interesting relationship with China over the last year,
Yes.
Going through various peaks and troughs. So I would be very interested to hear your views on where that relationship is going and whether the whole idea of Singapore being a logistical hub of OBOR, which some in Singapore have envisioned, will it happen given the certain political turns that we have seen in the last few months and last year?
Well, despite the ups and downs, what I think in general, the Sino-Singapore relations, they're quite stable because they share lots of common interests and based on the historical, relations. Singapore, as you're right, it is very active, super active in trying to bring those Chinese investments and trying to labeling itself as the hub. But the biggest problem right now is the competition from Malaysia. Several ports that China has invested and several, logistics projects that China has invested. So, but on the other hand, Singapore is also confident in the sense that it could, it could provide alternative, cooperative initiatives such as in finance, such as in logistics that try to help China itself. So the focus are kind of like different. Singapore is the largest foreign investor in China, while China is not the largest one in Singapore. So Singapore it also tries to diversify its economic relations. So like everyone says, don't put all the eggs in one basket. So I think in the end, eventually, Singapore will hold fast to its its principle of balance of power, of trying to hedge while also maximize benefit.
So just to round off this discussion, what do you think are the possibilities for India? Because you have studied Chinese economic diplomacy very closely, and India is also one of the important partners of ASEAN countries. Where does it lack? There are some issues around India's ability to deliver perhaps on infrastructure. But what can India do, as this is also the year when India and ASEAN are celebrating one of their important 25 years of their partnership. We will have the 10 ASEAN member states here in Delhi next week. What do you think India can do better in terms of economic diplomacy, especially if you look at it, if you're looking at it through the Chinese prism?
Mm-hmm. Well, it is a very broad question, but in my mind, India has been doing a very sophisticated, very quiet connectivity work with Southeast Asian countries. For example, the Kaladan multimodal project, and also it tries to cooperate with Japan in linking like Myanmar with northeast part of India. But the biggest concern in my mind is the geopolitical competition between China and India, especially the recent standoff crisis. And China also has the headache of how to promote the BCIM economic corridor. Well, India definitely is a very influential player, but somehow it looks kind of like gloomy for China. So in that sense, in the short term, I didn't see India would shift its attitude, but of course you can see it is actively promoting its own, economic relations with ASEAN countries. I would say it is a good thing for ASEAN. They have more options. They can choose, they can compare, and they can even bargain with good terms, which happened in the Jakarta-Bandung Railway. China was won the project without the sovereignty guarantee. So which is also dangerous for the outsiders. Like, what if China and India are bidding for something? Then the host country, they may try to have the best deal. So that is the thing that also the other thing I have concern with. So India and China and other countries, they have to bear in mind what is the maximum interest for their own country, for their own company.
So excellent. I think as Chinese and Indians interact in different dimensions, cooperate and collaborate in some dimensions, compete in others. Good days for ASEAN. They can pick and choose. They can they can balance it out. So I think that's a good story, almost for a region that is passing through a difficult time. So thank you so much, Dr. Zhong, and welcome to ORF. And I think I had forgotten to mention that she is a researcher at RSIS, which is one of the premier institutions in ASEAN. Thank you so much.
Thank you.